All right, so this video series is going to be on how I build case reeds, and specifically what I'll be doing here is building a 36cc case reed using DSM-RC cases. So it turns out that the 320, the G320, that is the Zenoa G320 RC bolt pattern for the head over here is pretty common for a bunch of different kinds of engines. So you'll see on like places like AliExpress, you'll find 32, 34, 36, 38, and 45cc. All of these will fit on a G320 RC type case. At least they should. I can definitely confirm that the 32, 34, and 36 and 38 will fit. I haven't built anything with a 45 yet, but Bartolone Racing makes the Brovon reed cases, or the Brovon 45cc reed case engine, and that's just, you know, his G320 case with a 45cc head. So the cheapest way to build one of these things is to actually just get your cases. So they would be either OBR, so Neil Brothers Racing, or Bartolone, or in this case I'm running DSM-RC. You can also get area RC cases that have a G320 bolt pattern, but those are challenging to get to run right, so I would not recommend people to start with the area RC cases unless if you're pretty comfortable with doing a lot of like engine troubleshooting and figuring it out. Here I'm using the DSM-RC cases because they look pretty good quality, and I actually got a pretty good deal on these. They were like $190 shipped from Germany. You can tell they're missing the bearings and the seal, so I'll have to put those in, and I'll show how to do that later. One thing that also stinks is that there's no gaskets on mine, which I thought was kind of annoying. I would have liked to have gaskets. One reason why I bought these cases is, one, because they're pretty affordable, right? I got them for $190 shipped. And two, one thing that I do really like is that they have, they don't use a case gasket. You just use case sealant, which can sound like a pain, but it's actually much better if you can do that. So like, I think the OBR and the Bartolone cases also just use case sealant, and that's just like so much better than dealing with gaskets, in my opinion, because the area RC cases, for example, use gaskets, and those are especially annoying to use because those gaskets are hard to get. You have to order them from China. So that's like, you know, it takes forever to get them, and they're pretty expensive. In addition to that, this thing has like a Delrin isolator as opposed to a fiberglass one, which is what Area RC uses. You'll see a similar setup on the OBR and on the BART cases. So that's enough about the cases. Let's get into the engine. So I bought this off of AliExpress. It's just, you know, one of those like 36cc dual ring piston engines. And it's, you know, from the outside it looks okay. I actually have a couple issues with this. One of them, it's missing this bolt here, which is annoying. And then two, the spark plug cap kind of broke. You can see the coil in there. I have to put it back in, but it's just like annoying. This type of stuff shouldn't really happen. But what I'll be doing next is tearing this thing down so that we can take a look inside. So now I want to get into the 36cc engine. So as I said, you know, I pointed out the things I didn't like. These engines, I've dealt with some of these, you know, Rofun style engines before, and there's always like a couple of things that are consistently bad with these that I would recommend people change. One of them is these spark plugs are not very good. I was running like a King motor, which is similar to these Rofuns, and then the electrode just like fell off, and then my spark plug didn't work anymore. and I was just running the stock Chinese spark plug. So it's like, it's called a torch or whatever. So I'm not even going to bother with this, to be honest. It would run with it, but it's, it would, realistically, it would run with it and it would run okay. It's just that I've had these things fail pretty catastrophically, and then it left me stranded because I was running this engine on a goped, so it was like my mode of transportation. So I'm a little bit burnt out from Chinese spark plugs, and I don't deal with those anymore. So I'd recommend getting something quality. You don't have to get the NGK Iridium, something like this. This one's pretty pricey. I think it's like $6 to $9 per plug, which is a lot of money for a single spark plug. But you can get, if you just get like an NGK CMR7H plug, then you'll be set. Those run really well. So that's what I would recommend. I like these plugs for other reasons, but for most people it just really doesn't matter, and you don't need to spend the money on something like this. The other thing that's sort of questionable for me is this carburetor. It's a Walbro style carburetor, but it's not a Walbro, right? It's a Rouging, which is whatever that is. Yeah, I don't know if this is a situation where, like, the Chinese Walbro factory, when it's nighttime, they just start pumping out these bad boys instead of the Walbro carbs, but I'm probably not gonna use this. I think it probably would be fine, because I want to say, like, there's a lot of people out there who use these engines just stock, and like, in like RC cars and things like that, and it works just fine. I just want to make sure that for this build, like, I'm working with something that I know for sure will be just fine and will work well. And I have a Walbro on hand, so I'll use that. But I might make an extra video and run the engine with this carburetor, just because, like, if you're trying to save your pennies, it'd be really nice if this would work, as opposed to having to go out and buy like an 1107 carb for another $50. All right, so we're gonna get into this teardown now. Okay, so now let's really get into this. I usually start by taking these Phillips head screws off that screw into the plastic cover, because the threads on the plastic cover are weaker than the metal threads on the cases. So let's get those bad boys off. Next, let's just mess with this thing. So this is a, great, 4mm wrench. And that works for these M5 screws over here. So just crank them off. Oops, it's hard to do this with the camera in the way. So I want to clearly show everything I'm doing, which is not easy. All right, I think that one's loose. Okay, so I'll take that off. There's a couple of things that are stuck, so there's the kill switch. All right, so this type of flywheel is a little bit different than what people who are used to Zenoas will be used to. This is one of those Chinese easy start flywheels, so that's why it has this, like, this setup here, because I want to say it's like got a dual spring or something in here that, like, helps you crank the engine a little bit harder, and it's supposed to make it easier to start, supposedly. So next, let's get this ignition off. So first I want to make sure that I am not on the magnet side, which I'm not. I don't feel the resistance there, so let's pop this guy off. It's just this is probably a 3mm. Yep, so it's just 3mm hex wrench. We'll get these guys off.
Let's do that.
Alright, this should just come off, and then it's okay. The bolts kind of fell, but we'll figure that out. So there's the plastic washer, there's the other plastic washer, and then the bolts are probably on the magnet, would be my expectation. Yeah, they're somewhere in there. Okay, so we just got to get the other bolt on this side so that we can remove our, oof, that's in there kind of tight. This is just to remove the fan cover.
almost there.
Okay, oh nice. It's got a little brass insert to protect the plastic. That's a nice little feature. Not necessarily what I would expect. So I'm just gonna keep taking off the easy stuff. So something fell. So here goes the manifold for the carb. There goes that. All right. And that's just, again, a 5mm screw. So, oh, this one's actually kind of nice. So this is surprising. It's got brass inserts, even for where the bolts go in here. That's actually kind of nice. If this plastic's any good, this is not a bad part, to be completely honest. Okay, so next up, I got my aluminum piston stopper tool. Just gonna thread this bad boy in there, and then that'll help me to remove the clutch and to remove the flywheel. Hopefully. Oh, that was so much easier than I thought it would be. Okay, cool. So that apparently works, which is very nice because, again, I don't have the right tool here. Alrighty then, so this should just come off. Alright, so that's how their easy starter thing looks like. It replaces the flywheel nut, and you just put this thing on. Alright, so I got my flywheel puller over here. Just gonna screw these bad boys down, and then just tighten the middle one, and then it should just go. Should be this size. Yep, sure is. There you go. Okay, that's always very violent and scary. So that flywheel is pretty well on there, and now it is not. So don't forget your Woodruff key. This guy over here. These are important. You set the timing on the flywheel, so don't lose that. So at this point, we've gotten the flywheel off. Now it's time to remove the clutch, because in my case, I'm going to be running this engine on a goped, so I won't need the clutch. I also need to take the clutch off anyways, though, because I have to take the whole thing apart, right? What we're trying to do here essentially is we're harvesting all the parts from this 36cc engine, and we're just going to transfer it over to the DSM cases. All right, here we go. Okay. So, wow, these are on there pretty good, huh?
Okay.
Forgot. I mean, in my case, like, when you buy these, it asks if you have, like, a Losi or Baja style engine. I don't care because I'm not using the clutch. And that relates to the clutch case, because they're different depending on which RC car you have. So if you're an RC guy, just make sure you get the right one. Yep. And under the clutch, there's always washers, so make sure you don't lose those either. If you ever can't remember how the clutch goes, it's the bolt, then the wavy washer, then that goes onto the clutch, and then underneath you always need to have these spacers. They're used as spacers, and then that allows the clutch to open up, because there's a little gap between the clutch and the carrier. So let's get this carrier off now. Okay, yeah, wow, these guys really, I don't know, they put, yeah, it just looks like there's Loctite on this thing. Okay, cool. So that's off. So now we need to take the carrier out. So I'll show my trick for that, which is just, you can take your flywheel puller and then just put these bolts in, and then these bolts will press against the clutch cover in the back here, and then that should just pop the carrier off. So let's do that. There you go. So yeah, you can't really see, but I'll show the marks of where the bolts were after it comes off. There you go, boom. So you see here, you can kind of see there and there. That's where the bolts were touching on the back. All right, so off with this clutch case.
Okay. Alright. This goes out. Sclae.
Okay. Sometimes it's a tight fit for the clutch cover. Yeah, this one feels tight. So I need that bolt off. You can bop it with like a rubber mallet or something. I wouldn't hit it with a regular hammer because that could damage it. So these are kind of interesting as far as the casting is concerned. It's not that bad though. It's not that bad. These are decent cases. It's probably, my second set of these that I'll have because I do this a lot. It's just so much cheaper. For $145, you get everything you need. Top end, crank, flywheel cover, plastic heat shield or plastic cover, the fan shroud. You can get a clutch, everything. So in my recommendation is always, if you want to build one of these types of case reeds, just buy like a complete engine and just strip all the parts from it and use it on like whatever case reed you want. You will need new base gasket though. So one thing that I actually want to mention really quick before I finish taking this thing apart is that I measured the squish. And so the squish is just the amount of distance between the top of the piston and the bottom of the dome. And so one way to do that is to you just put a piece of solder in there, and then you want it to point towards the transfers. The reason why is because if you have it pointing forward or back, the piston can like rock back or forth, and then that could affect your squish measurement. So it's more reliable if you go on the transfer side, because then you eliminate that rocking or you reduce it. Anyways, what I found is that the squish is enormous. It's 60 thousandths of an inch. So this is the actual wire that I used to measure the squish, and you can see it's like barely squished at all. There's not really much of a difference. That's not how it should look. Your squish for RC engines, it'll vary depending on the engine. I think the lowest you really want to go is like 15 thousandths of an inch is like very tight squish. And so I want to say 15 to 25 thousandths is probably what you'll have as squish, very roughly speaking, for a 23cc to like 36, 38cc engine. So this thing's way off. It's at 60 thousandths of an inch. So that's way, way, way too big. So there's two ways to fix that. You could, get rid of the base gasket, but I measured the base gasket on this thing and it's only 10 thousandths of an inch. The other option is to use a different crank, which is what I'm going to do in this case. But I'll talk about that later. So here I'm just trying to focus on the disassembly of this engine, just trying to get the last bits of it apart. All right, let's open it up. Okie dokie. So this is the famed dual ring piston that I don't know why, but it's like all the ads that I see make it seem like it's the bee's knees to have a dual ring piston, but it's not really that big of a deal. This thing's pretty gross. There shouldn't, I don't know, black residue like that, I find that a little bit suspicious, but okay. So yeah, we have this thing apart pretty much. So one thing that's kind of annoying with these Rofun engines is you'll see that transfer divider, it doesn't come all the way out. So what that means is that there's no support for the ring, for the piston ring, that is, across that entire length of both of the transfers. So that's a pretty big gap for the ring to be falling into, because you have to remember the ring's like expanded under the pressure of the gases, and that's how the seal is created. And so the ring's always trying to be pushed out into the walls of the cylinder, and this is a pretty large area for the ring to be falling into. So I wouldn't be surprised if these top ends don't last too many hours as a result. It's really unfortunate because all they had to do was just have that divider come all the way out, but they didn't do it. Other than that, I mean, it looks pretty standard to me. We don't care about the intake port here because we're going to fill it up with epoxy and use this as a casereed cylinder. It is a little bit concerning, like all the wear that I'm seeing in here. There's like a ton of wear, right? All these vertical lines going in here. Let's bring this a little bit closer. So we see, all these vertical lines, they're not quite scratches, but definitely it's wearing in the honing. So that's a little bit concerning, but I already bought the engine. It's too late now, so I gotta just roll with it. Okay, so the C-clips they use have tails. I've never personally run into this problem, but I've heard that C-clips with tails can be a little bit less reliable, because those tails can stick out and get picked up by the transfer. So I'm probably going to replace these with like Zenoa style C-clips just for safety. But yeah, you just pull it by the tail and it comes right out. And then I typically just push the piston from the other side. Well, actually, I'm getting both of these out, so I might as well. There you go. So these are screwed. You can't reuse C-clips once you take them out. You don't put them back in. It's just they're a one-time use sort of thing. So do not reuse C-clips. When people do it, it's risky though. I will definitely say that. So here's our thrust bearing, and then the spacers for it, and then our pin. All right, so might swap this out for a Zenoa pin and some Zenoa hardware, because that stuff's lighter and that just gives a little bit better performance for the engine. But yeah, this is what the piston looks like. So it looks like the ring gaps go towards the back in this engine. That could make sense. I'll have to double check my video and then I'll confirm that later, but that could make sense because you see how the transfer overlaps with the intake. That's where the ring gaps would go if they were in the front. So that means the rings would be poking in and out of that huge transfer, and then that just means that the engine would fall apart in like no time. All right, 1, 2, 3, 4. So let's get this out. Just another bunch of 5mm bolts. So to get these apart, I just bopped the crank with a plastic hammer. Make sure you use a plastic hammer so you don't break things. Apparently these are not using spring pins. These are just regular pins. So just take note of that when you take it apart. Those things are going to want to fall out. So let's take that gasket out, and then now the crank can be removed. There you go. And we're done. That's our crank. So it just looks like all the other Rofun cranks I've dealt with. All right. So there you have it. That's everything that came out of this engine. I'll be tossing the cases. Well, not literally, but you know, I'll be putting them aside and taking all this other stuff. As I mentioned, there's a couple of things that I'm going to do differently when it comes time to putting the parts on the DSM cases. But that's it for this video. This is just the disassembly. For the next video, what I'll be doing is either some cylinder porting or setting up the bottom end. So stay tuned, and thanks for watching.